George in DeLand, Florida. I'm glad you called, sir. Thank you for waiting. How are you doing?
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to ask you need to begin to understand the media and why they're unhinged. You really need to go back decades, Rush. Before Rush Limbaugh, conservative radio, and Fox News, my question is, what was this fake news effect on American voters before you came along?
Well, there was a monopoly. As recently as August 1st, 1988, when this program started, all we had back then, and to me, 1988 seems like yesterday. To a lot of people, it's the Jurassic Age. But to me, since that was the day I started, 1988 seems like yesterday. And in 1988, we had ABC, CBS, and NBC, and CNN had just started. They'd been 5 years or so in. And that was it. They had a monopoly. They had the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the news on all three of those networks was identical. Oftentimes in the nightly news, the news events would be in the same order. There literally was very little different other than the specials they would do.
So my question is, if you were harmed back then and you have this media that won't tell your story truthfully, what was your recourse? What happened? And I think in my opinion, what happened is we withdraw socially and politically at that time. And before you came along in the conservative radio, that monopoly has caused harm to a lot of people. Now, you come along. Trump has not come along yet. People are getting some courage that, okay, there are some places I can tell my story. But when I went saw Donald Trump at a rally in Daytona Beach, I saw this hope in people's eyes of justice, because now this justice that they were able to see, because the media no longer controls that, and the media today will never change, because if they do, they'll realize that they have affected the lives of millions of people in the last few decades. And
what do you mean
they won't be able to?
What do you mean? What do you mean they'll never change?
Well, they'll realize that they have they basically have turned themselves into, they victimized not telling the truth when someone's been harmed, like in the military or through borders. By not telling people stories, they've actually helped, because of political gain, they basically have become the victimizer. And so they're not going, if they realize that they've actually caused this harm, and that's why they've basically gone unhinged, because they cannot come to that conclusion that they've actually caused the problems in Syria by not. Okay,
wait a minute. Now you're getting. Let me see if I can translate this. They have a monopoly in 1988. You asked what could people do back then when the media was lying about them. There wasn't much. But again, the media, it's always been left wing. I'm going to say something here that many of you might find, I don't know, profound or shocking or what have you. Look, I remember it. I remember the media back then. It was all left all the time. But it seemed, aside from that, it was benign. And what it took to overcome it was somebody like Ronald Reagan, who was able to go over the heads of the media and speak directly to people without the benefit or the need of the media translating or reporting or deciphering or what have you. Republicans won elections, of course, during this period of time, but during this period of time is when the left began to really entrench itself in the bureaucracy and in all of these nonprofits. They took over the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, you name it, all the Mellon groups. They were taking them over. Nobody saw it. It was nobody's radar. They were embedding themselves in the unelected bureaucracy, and they were well aware of the monopoly they had, and therefore they did a fairly decent job of hiding. They didn't hide the bias, but they hid the agenda. Now, when this program came along in 1988, that was the first assault on this monopoly. And then as this conservative media grew, first with other radio talk shows, locally, then nationally, and then my television show hit for 4 years, and then Fox News hit 3 years after that. And then the internet blew up, and we got blogs and conservative websites, and the magazines that were conservative went online. And there became a full-fledged alternative media. That would be us. And this destroyed the monopoly. The monopoly the media had gave them opportunity for two things: what to report and what to ignore. And what they ignored is what we reported, and that served to expose who they were every bit as much as documenting their bias. The thing that happened as a result of them losing their monopoly, they haven't changed their ideological stripes, but they have thrown away. It's gone now. There is not even a pretense of objectivity. They don't even try to hide behind that anymore. There's no pretense of fairness. It is all out ideological warfare. And so I believe that busting up the liberal monopoly of the news, the drive-by media monopoly, has in part contributed to the, how should I phrase it, the ongoing ideological battles, the partisan divide, because what the alternative media did, was awaken all of the Americans who were not fairly represented in the media. When this program started, practically everybody that called began by saying, thank you, I'm not used to hearing what I think in the media, not nationally. So a bunch of people, average, ordinary Americans, began to have their thoughts, their opinions validated because they were all over national media and on websites and eventually on Fox News. And it gave them confidence and strength. And that's when the battles began. The left and their news monopoly, they lost their contentment. They lost the fact that they were benign. They lost the fact that they owned it just by waking up every day. It became a battle. It became an all-out war. And now I think media is a battleground, just as electoral politics is. And it's not going away anytime soon. It's not going to change. It's part of the evolution of this. And in the process, who the left-wing media is has been fully exposed. Now, there's no doubt they always were what they are now. It's just they were able to hide that for the longest time. But now it is known that they leave media and go to work for a congressman or senator and then go to work for a network and then come back, and it's incestuous. They marry each other in Washington, D.C., and they work at each other's think tanks and so forth. The entire establishment of left-wing media and its related and associated businesses, such as politics, has been exposed. And so it's not nearly as easy for them. Here's the bottom line. They used to own the shaping of public opinion. They owned it. There was no opposition to it, other than what might be local newspapers or in local media, but there was no competition for it. Now it's a battle every day for what they've always been. They've told everybody all these years that all they were doing was reporting the news. They were just out making news. They were not making the news. They were bending, shaping, forming, flaking public opinion. They were advancing the left-wing agenda, which was found in the Democrat Party. They were always doing that. That's what this busting up of their monopoly has exposed, who they've always been. They've sort of been drawn out. And so the partisan nature of things has intensified as a result of their monopoly being blown. I have to be honest about that. I think that's one of the things.